over the course of my lifetime, I certainly am not going to say for a minute that I didn't. Much of the information I have today is based on all the mistakes and errors that I made, and or just because of the business and the nature of being involved in real estate to the extent that I was. I also saw others make mistakes that you learn quickly, and then you adapt, and then you utilize that.
All right, everybody. I've got my good friend, Frank Taylor, here on the show with me. I'm super excited to do this with you again. You're looking incredibly sharp. I'm loving that beard. And I'm trying to get it as clean as you. I think you said earlier that every gray hair is a transaction. So I guess I know what I have to look forward to.
Well, they're earned. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So each and every one. I don't necessarily like looking like Santa Claus just before Christmas begins. Everybody comes up and asks me for a present, but no. You rock a beard yourself. So what are you talking about, pal?
I am. You know what? November, right? It's for a good cause, and I like it. It keeps me warm. So it's a time of the year I want to stay warm.
Well, it gives you character. It's got great character. I've enjoyed also seeing everything that you're doing down in Mexico, as they say.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm very happy for you.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I think part of that is remembering why you're doing what you're doing. As much as I enjoy the business aspect of it, I also enjoy the family aspect of it as well, too, and friends and family. And that this is not a forever ride. And you got to remember why you're doing what you're doing. I think that's important.
It's the most important thing of all. And I think we're both blessed in that way. So, as long as you have your priorities right, then life is a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
So
I want to share something real quick, and then we're going to get into this, right? And this might be a longer podcast, so just everybody who's tuning in, because when myself and Frank sit down, we always have a good conversation, and I want to really let people know how much I do respect you, and I call you when I'm looking for advice as well too. So that's. It's important that people understand that. So thank you for what you've shared with me over the time that we've known each other. But I do want to share something that you touched on. I went to an event last week with my team.
Okay.
And 3:30, I decided to leave. And Dara's like, "Well, why are you leaving now? And are you taking the 407?" And I said, "No, I'm going to take the 401." She goes, "Well, that's going to take you a long time to get there." I'm like, "I know." And so I did it because I wanted to, because it's been a difficult year in my business. And, I do a lot with a lot of real estate investors. And so we've taken obviously a big hit on that space. And I want to remember why I left the corporate world. It took me 4 hours to get there. However, I planned it out. I knew that I had clients that I had to call. I had some podcasts in queue that I was going to maybe potentially listen to. I saw some of the road rage, and I allowed them to come in and take their time because I planned it. And I think that's what it's about. It's about planning why you're doing what you're doing. And also, if you are an entrepreneur, remembering that, yes, there are ups and downs in this. And that was just a nice little reminder of this is what I chose.
Reflection. And as time goes by in life, as we all know, we always kind of lean back on some of the experiences that we've had through life. And the most important ones are the ones sometimes that we've had to learn the hardest lessons. And then it's what we do with that matters in the end. And so over the course of my lifetime, I certainly am not going to say for a minute that I didn't. Much of the information I have today is based on all the mistakes and errors that I made, and or just because of the business and the nature of being involved in real estate to the extent that I was. I also saw others make mistakes that you learn quickly, and then you adapt, and then you utilize that to benefit, because it doesn't matter what you do or say. You can give somebody the best information and advice, but they're of their own free will. So it's going to be totally up to them on whether they decide to follow that advice, right?
Absolutely.
And so you can't stop somebody from from making an error if that's what they choose to do, so long as you've let them know about what all could unfold. And if you've done that, then you've done your job, right?
Great.
So, yeah.
So let's jump into it. We did a podcast last year, March 16th, 2022.
All right.
I remember a few people had reached out to me afterwards, like, Gary, there's no way. It's not going to get that bad. And there's a quote right at the beginning of the podcast. We snipped this out. It's you talking. You said, I'm advising clients to pay down debt. Don't keep money in the bank. No. You're not going to keep money in the bank. You're going to pay down your debt. And that's how the podcast started. And you saw something that was happening. And I think it's because of your experience. You'd seen something like this happen before. And, one of the things I always say is that history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. So you obviously saw a rhythm. You saw something happening. Can we kind of maybe touch on that? And then also kind of just talk about a little bit more about like who you are, what you do, your business, and how you help individuals. So can I maybe just tie those two questions into one?
Sure. So I'm certainly not one, and that's another reason why I kind of pulled out of doing the podcast, because I was getting into having to deal with more to do with forecasts. And I'm certainly by no means qualified to be an economist or a forecaster. However, over the years, you begin to understand how to read the smoke signals that are going on out there, the signs. And, one sign plus another sign, and, many different things were unfolding that provided, I think, worthy caution to provide to others to be aware of. So I was the guy who was kind of, talking about caution, because I always care about other people, even if I haven't met them before. Obviously, I want people to do well and succeed.
Right.
And so I was that kind of canary in the coal mine, kind of, chirping out a message that wasn't necessarily as well received back then. And then it's really not important in any way to say, I told you so, because that's not what it was about. It was about to try and provide a message for people to do somewhat of a risk analysis of what they have. And we saw the greatest wave in real estate over a period of time. I'm sure it's going to go down as a historical moment in real estate, Canadian real estate. And that wave, of which we would never have been able to predict with COVID going the direction that we did, because, the market was adjusting in 2019. It was just about to go through its due course of its natural stage of adjustment that is known to be historic. And then, of course, when COVID occurred, everybody thought, well, I thought for sure, this is the moment for sure that's going to take it over. And then we saw what unfolded, and there's no one on earth that could have predicted it, right? So when you have values increasing so dramatically at such a low rate, which is not going to be something that it shouldn't have been allowed to go that long, to be honest with you, but it was. And so when you knew that something was going to happen, when you know what historical mortgage rates are over the last 50 years, history does play that role in knowing that this is only going to last for so long. So my messaging at the time was to look at the assets. If they're keepers, those are the ones that you want to, keep, optimize. And then you want to look at the other assets that you have your equity growth that aren't keepers. Take that money, pay down your debt, and get rid of as much debt as you can be, so that you can then be in a position to take advantage of the opportunities now that I see unfolding now, that I knew would be unfolding and have only just begun to unfold, and then be able to be in a position to actually capitalize. Because the greatest wealth, the greatest generational wealth, again, we're going to history. This is not because I say that, this is historic, has always been made in times of turbulence and downward cycles, right? And then it's looking and knowing how to find those opportunities that make sense for you for the long term. But anything you look at today is going to have to be, again, for all real estate should be a long-term keep and hold place. If that's the action that you're taking, make sure it's something that you want to own long term. And if you do that, you'll never lose, right?
Right.
For those right now that have properties that they've kept long term, right? Those people aren't worried. They're not sweating. The problem is, did they stay on variable? And I chimed out a while back, more than a year or two ago, that people should be looking at the 10-year terms. You hear everyone talk about the 30-year terms in the States and how amazing that is. Yet we had a 10-year rate that could have been taken advantage of, and I'm sure many did. But for those who didn't, they could have had a 10-year mortgage in the 3% range for 10 years. So when you buy an investment, you want to try not only optimize your income and you want to optimize your expenses, and your mortgage payment, having that stabilized, is a critical part of investing in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it that you saw? And you know what? And there was something that you said there I thought was interesting, because you saw something happen and you thought it was going to happen in 2019. And so then essentially there was more fuel that was put onto, we'll call it the fire, which was more printing of money. And then that just allowed that market to take off. Because I also thought too that we were going to finally see that, correction happen, and it didn't. And it took off. But I didn't know or realize that it was going to happen. I think maybe the way that you had saw it or see it coming. What was it specifically? And did you see something similar to the late 80s, early 90s?
Exactly. So, obviously I'm an older dude, and I started my career in investing in real estate and purchasing real estate in the 80s. And so when there's an element of, let's say, a fever, let's say, just everybody's buying it, when it gets so stupid, that it's stupid in a great way for those, but that no matter what you bought, you could never lose. Even if you made the worst decisions, you could at least get out somewhat unscathed or completely unscathed, which is a sign, right? And when you have rates that low and there's that much fervor going on there, that is the sign, as the quotes, there's myriads of quotes. When people are greedy, that's when you have caution, right? And when there's fear in the air, that's when you take advantage of opportunity. And so nobody knows the time in the day. I couldn't have, but I certainly knew that the clouds were in the sky. I would describe it, as a tsunami waiting way back. You can't see it, but it's out there. And eventually it's going to come to shore. And that was the signs that I saw. However, many people made a whole lot of money during that time frame. It's just, did they exit off that wave? Was their timing perfect? For some, it was. For many of my clients, they timed it right. And for those that may have listened that I've never met before, perhaps maybe they did some risk analysis and adjusted. But for many, they didn't get off the wave right on time. But it's not too late. Like, if you made, let's say you got $500,000, pick a number, it doesn't matter. Plug in your number, $500,000 in equity that you've realized over the last 5 years, right? So Bob's house down the street just sold for, blah, blah, blah. And I've got $500,000, right? That's a number. It's a number. It wasn't like you had $500,000 sitting in a chest, sitting there, right? That you could roll your fingers through. It was a number in which you've got to also be willing to accept that maybe you're not going to make as much if you have to divest. I'm not a believer of selling real estate. So if you can make it work, right?
Yes.
Then don't sell. I'm not an advocate of selling, but if you are in financial duress, or if you have been of the thought that rates are going to come back down, or that things were going to go back to the way they were, or even just a little bit better, again, history shows that the probability of that, and with what's going on around the world right now, there's so many layers that one has to understand that if you can adjust and make it work now, okay, in today's environment, however that's defined, you're going to do okay, right? You just got to figure it out. But if you're struggling, right, if you're trying to make ends meet, right, and you're worried, and it kills you to take a bit of a less money in order to get that capital back out, that's greed, right? And so, however you define that, and there's a lot of emotion involved in that, but you have to be able to cut your losses, I guess, your gains, and maybe take a shave on that gain in order to be able to then now be able to capitalize on what's happening now. Because what's happening now, for those who are looking, it's all beginning, and it's now starting to be realized. And so that for those who have been preparing for this, I'm happy to say I'm proud that they were smart enough to kind of make those adjustments and be ready, because now is the time. Like, I'm very optimistic now.
Right. So you're saying that we are at the bottom or close to the bottom, which is always a difficult thing to time.
The bottom of what?
Well, the bottom of where prices are currently.
No, I didn't say that. No, we're just beginning.
Oh, you think we're just beginning?
Yeah, we're at the beginning of the ride, man. We're on the roller coaster, and it's going chink, 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 chink. And it's just beginning. Now, define what that means. What does that mean? Does that mean that all of a sudden, it's not like there's going to be, well, I don't know. When you look at the media today, it's, so I get plugged in, I just plug into data of factual information. So I don't pay attention to what the media reports. I get the direct link from the Bank of Canada with their reports and what they are providing. Okay. And just recently, thank God, for the first time, I think it was long overdue, the Bank of Canada finally announced, just last week, I believe, that these rates are here to stay, that what we saw before is gone, and people have to accept that this is here to stay. And so many probably thought, oh my God, that's the worst message they wanted to hear. However, actually, it was the best message for those who have been waiting and struggling and doing everything that they can to survive. Now it's clear, the Bank of Canada has made it clear that things aren't going back to how they were. And so they need to make decisions. And so by giving that message, allowed individuals to make, or it puts them in a position now to make decisions. And if they don't listen to that message, shame on them, because the rest is noise, right? Always deal with fact, right? So we talk about history, but history is, especially when it's to do with real estate, is based on data, and it's based on factual information, right? It's not a theory, right? So, and you're right when you say that history is never going to repeat itself again, but many times history is got so many similarities, and the similarities are exactly what's happening now. So I'll give you an example. Let's just run through it. So now, when did you see vendor take back mortgages being offered? Now they're being offered all the time, right? That's a sign of the change that occurs in a market that's going through an adjustment, right? You're probably going to be in a position, or if for those who can take advantage of opportunities, that you're going to have family investment portfolios, of which anyone who's astute is in finance and in history is going to know that, this cycle could last. It usually takes, if it's significant, right? There's the beginning of it. And then there's, it's basically a cycle that kind of goes down, and then it basically comes and it levels out. And then there's a few blips there. And then eventually it starts to go back up. But that's usually historically around 10 years from beginning to end, right? So for those that are ready, right, these are the times, because there's going to be situations where you could, if you qualify for the mortgage, with a vendor take back, you might be able to get into properties that you didn't even think were possible. And most importantly, locations that you didn't think would be possible, right? I mean, I have my clients and I have my participants in my master sessions program. They're looking in now they're looking in the GTA. They're looking in areas that were not possible before, and opportunities are being revealed. It's just you need to know where to look and how to look for them, but you also need to be able to capitalize on it, right? So my group, my clients are able to capitalize on that. So for us, it's good news. And for those who have to make decisions, it's just now's the time. Make decisions that are going to be for the best interest of you and your family and for your long-term financial health.
So let me just jump in there for a quick minute there, Frank. So in regards to the rates staying where they are for now, for some time, and we're not going back to the old norm, okay, which is what the Bank of Canada came out and said, right? That's one. Number two is, then do you see potentially a change happening with longer amortizations? And what I mean by that is, if there's a lot of families out there that are going to be in some difficulty, because I think you've got $9 billion of renewals coming up in the next 2 to 3 years, those families are going to be in a very difficult position. The banks don't want those homes. I think that's pretty clear. Do they change something, or do they lower the rates? Do you understand where I'm going with this? Like, something has to give. You can't have just complete blood in the streets.
Okay. Well, we're talking about two different discussions. I focus on investment models, right? Yep. And then, of course, the largest segment of the market is residential, right? People who bought residential properties for themselves, right? But I think that the majority of people listening here have bought properties for investment purposes. It's safe to assume, right? So if you're counting on rates going down marginally, okay, which will eventually happen marginally, the 50-year historic rate for a 5-year term for 50 years has been between 7 and 9%. Okay. So I don't like saying the 9% because I don't want to instill fear. I actually want to instill the opposite of fear, because what I see unfolding, and I feel for those that are struggling, but they've got to make decisions, right? They have to make decisions, right? And we're getting down to that horrible word, greed, right? Right? They don't want to lose. They're struggling. They're moving out of their condo. They're moving into their mom and dad's. They're trying to get like a rent that is going to at least cover all the expenses. But, we're starting to see that maybe rents have we're seeing a bit of a stall in rents for the first time in many years. That's because the rates have increased so much, right? There's a point in where it's not feasible, right? And then the other question is that you got to make sure that, is the tenant that you've got paying that crazy awesome rent? Are they going to be able to continue paying that rent ongoing? It's great to get phenomenal rent rates, but there also has to be an element of whether it's sustainable. That's the key, right? Because you don't want high turnover, and there's so many different models now. But when you talk about the amortization, what we're talking about is right now the Bank Act, right, is such that the banks are basically, they're breaking the governance of the act, but because they're basically allowing people to prevent power of sales, to prevent that flood of listings and so on and so forth, and market decline. They're allowing people to pay interest only, or for those who are just on the cusp and can't even pay the full interest, they're adding that on. And that's where you're hearing the story of all these amortization periods getting pushed and prolonged.
70, in 90 years.
Some.
Yeah.
I don't even want to imagine the situation they're in are 90 years. See, if you agreed, so in Europe, many countries in Europe, they have long-term amortization periods just because it's Europe. And many of the properties are so expensive that they become more of a lifetime commitment in which family then takes over that ownership, and the properties tend to stay in the family for generations, right? So if you agreed in your original agreement to an amortization of that period, then that's okay. But right now we got a lot of things, a lot of rules that are being broken that are going to have to be adjusted. So is an answer possibly that they do officially do readjustments on amortization periods, and so that you're still paying down, you're not only paying your interest and your principal, but it's not becoming so adverse that you're getting into a 50, 60, 70, 90-year term that you didn't agree to, right? But you're also thankful that the bank's giving you some leniency. Who wins in the end? It's the banks.
Always.
Okay.
Yep.
Like you got to divide it up. You got to look at so the banking industry is an essential. It's the most essential part of a government of a country's governance and stability. And we used to have what was considered the best banking system in the world, of which it's got itself into a little bit of jeopardy of late. And they're concerned about it. And they're concerned about it because, CMHC insurance, even that you call it, but that's a government self-insured program, right? And so if someone loses a property through power of sale, it goes to pick your financial institution, pick the name, and then it goes through that process. And then if it doesn't sell with them, then it goes on to the lap of CMHC. However, CMHC or any of the insurance bodies, the minute a property is taken over, they're automatically contacted, right? So it's a notice of possible claim, just like insurance would be, right? And then they have a say in the negotiations and the underwriting, because they don't want to see it come on their lap. So the banks now are sending messages, they're signaling by letting everybody know about all the mortgages, the percentage of mortgages that are coming due over the next year, 2, 3 years. They're letting everybody know so that, the truth is wide open for everybody to see that based on what's going on right now, it could be quite catastrophic for those who don't take action now. Right. So they're trying to, it's a way of risk management for them because they want people to start taking action. Yeah. Right. And they're giving them the notice to do that.
Now, somebody is in that, say, particular situation. There's thousands upon thousands of people that are about to face this. What do they do from a mental health standpoint, or the stress of thinking about this? Because this is a very stressful time for a lot of people. What are you advising, maybe if any of your clients are in that situation, or what's a message that you're sending out there for people that are in this tight situation? What do they do?
So I can tell them I can tell you what I do. Because of everything that's going on in the world right now, it's with all what you see in front of your eyes, that's, by any standard, it could be described as being incredibly disturbing, right? So, I listen to, podcasts that I that can make me laugh, and that I find the hosts like you to be inspiring, right? I read the news. So I read the reports. I read the news, not from any given source, but through sources that have links then to this data in the studies that they're referring to. And I find that so much easier rather than the bombardment of all this negativity. And I listen, I have clients that, that are senior executives at major companies, and they're having to go through, they've gone through never having to let people go, and they're letting people go. And that's incredibly stressful, right? Imagine having colleagues that you work with for, 10, 15, 20 years, and then you've got to let them go. That must be horrible. And it must be horrible also for those that are working for companies and seeing this. And so they're worried, right? So you have to get out. You've got to be able to obviously do all the things that are conscious. You have to disconnect. We're so attached to the phones. We're so attached to everything's clickbait, fear, media, right? And it's another reason it's not the messaging that I convey or want to be a part of, because again, listen, there's always a path out of a situation if you're willing to look that path right in the eye and deal with it. And then, you need to talk to family, talking, conversing, sharing, emoting. But you also need to get, I'm not going to say any, I admire the certain, many of the social media influencers have how much they've pivoted. Okay. But many were advocating leverage. And then now they're all coaches and expert mentors, right? So I don't have a problem with that, because there's a place for everything, but there's layers, there's levels of experience and depth, right? So in my program with my clients, they know that I don't guess, right? Like my business is about dealing with whatever the situation is, whether it's a proactive decision to, maybe pursue an asset, or whether it's something that they need to get out of. I'm going to give them the direction that they need to make sure that as long as they follow, basically the outline that I've told them to do, as long as they do that, the odds and probability of them getting out is going to be so much higher than if they listen to all the noise, or perhaps get guidance or information for free, or if they're, listening to others that may not have experience and might be, to a certain extent, are guessing. And I also know for a fact that some of these people that are doing very well, or at least it looks like they're doing very well, they're in trouble, right? And so I think messaging, I take being like what I've always admired about you, truthfully, is that you've always been one to get every aspect of a position or circumstance and try and get so many different opinions, so that you are letting your listeners and the people who follow you take that information to make the decisions that they need to make for themselves, right? And I admire that. And that's what I believe in, right? Like, I'm not here to make anybody. I said to you before I did the appearance, I want to be very proactive and positive. And we're in turbulence right now. Yeah. But I've always been kind of the rock in the sea in the turbulent war, that, that when people need advice in a calm voice and some direction, that's what I've always provided. But the information, as my dad would say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So I've been very lucky. Most of my clients follow perhaps the advice and direction based on the information that I have, being a full picture, right? And then I provide them with the options that they can pursue. So there's always a way to make it work. There is a way out. Being worried, being paralyzed, right, with fear or worry, that if anyone is suffering from that, that's a sign that you need to take action, right? And however one defines, but you need to talk to somebody, right? Yeah. You need to go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that's great advice. I think also, too, you're right. These phones are very powerful tools, but they could also be very overwhelming as well, too. Mm-hmm. Listen, I see everything that's happening on social media. I see the things that are happening in Israel and Palestine. I see these things, and you have to, we're not built to take in all that data. It's too much. And you have to find a way at times to unplug. And if you're not unplugging, find positive messaging, find people that you admire and look up to and get good information from. I get up in the morning and I go do yoga. I go for a walk. I'll listen to somebody that I'm enjoying at the time, whether it be a good podcast, or sometimes go back to old school, Jim Rohn or, Brian Tracy, because the mind is a powerful thing as well, too. And you've got to use all the resources that you possibly can and use it to help move you in a positive direction. And also, when fear holds you, you got to be able to break out of that and take action, which is what you said, as opposed to just sitting in it. And I think that's powerful messaging there, Frank. So I appreciate it.
Or beating yourself up. You know how many people, are like, I shoulda, woulda, shoulda, coulda. And then so it's like they're beating themselves up for not doing whatever they needed to do that they need to do now, but they're kind of like being hard on themselves and or feeling like they didn't win when they've done nothing but win for over these last years. I mean, like, you have to be able to kind of be kind to yourself. You've got to, if you can't cut yourself some slack and not be your worst critic, then that's a start point, right? Yep. You have to believe in what your abilities are and surround yourself with as much positive messaging and love of others and friends, and have that, have that safe place, right? Like in my master sessions, the mentorship program, everybody signs an NDA, and it's a very thorough one. And the reason is because everyone can actually be safe in this space, and they can actually talk about what's going on and be honest about it. And then the others are learning from each other, and they're obviously building a community among themselves, but it's a safe place so that you can actually be truthful, because I can't advise anybody if I don't know all the facts. You leave one fact out, right? You leave out, I can give you one example, right? So one example is, let's just say that there's a property that's sold for X number of dollars in this location, and it backs on to, let's say, something that wouldn't be described as being excellent. And then another unit on the other side of the same location backs on to, let's say, a park, same complex, but two different backgrounds, right?
Yep.
That's an important piece of information, right? Like that, you have to be, so it's, my advice is only as good as I can get it. However, just being honest with yourself is the key. Like, if you can't be honest with yourself, that's the key. You got to be honest and just be proactive.
Yep.
And you're doing a great job. Like, I can tell you, some of the people that you've had on, I always enjoy, not trying to blow smoke, but I enjoy your podcast because you always have the ability to be able to see the light and help others. And that's what I wanted. That's what I do and what I try and convey. And is a reason why I kind of pulled back, because I don't want to be the guy on podcast shows that are making people nervous. I actually am hoping that there's a group that listens to this that are ready to take action, because that's the good news right now, is that there's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's why I brought you back on again, because look, you've got the experience, you're technically strong. And I'm going to share something with you, because I did listen to what you said back in March last year. Did I fully believe it? I don't know, but I definitely took it in. And then, so this is you over here, experience, okay, technically strong. Then I was at my cottage and asked a question to my neighbor helping me cut down a tree. And I asked him a very simple question. I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm locking in." Now, remember, he's not in the real estate investing world. He's just, regular guy, bought a house. And I go, "Why?" And he goes, "Oh, because I can't afford it going any higher." So taking what you taught me and shared on that podcast and listening to what he said, driving home, and I go, "Dar, I think we really need to take a look at our portfolio." And we did. And we figured out the red line of where can we go? What's our max? And what was a hard decision at that time was we locked everything in last year. Now, people say, you make it sound like it's easy to lock in, but it's not, because we were in 3%, 3.25%. We had to go to 5.5%, 5.67%. And that's a difficult thing to do, because you're like, can it really get that bad? But taking those two conversations, high experience, technically strong, somebody who just owns a home, not in that real estate investment world, taking that information, massaging it, and like, you know what? I'd rather be able to sleep at night. And I think that's the key thing as well, too, because no expert, somebody who has opinions can all get it right. And so you got to take all that information and do what allows you to sleep at night.
You need to stabilize your expenses, however one defines, right? And so what your neighbor told you was that that was his threshold. He didn't want to take any chances. He knew that he could make that number, whatever that number was, and ride it through, right? So that's important messaging. I mean, you and I talked it feels like a couple of years ago, but I even talked to you about like the cottage market, right? And that there are certain markets that we're naturally going to be the first in the rung to take major hits. And cottages, rural properties in rural areas that are not, in major urban centers, assets that are, in let's say different market types, like categories A, B, and C, right? Rural, and the other thing too is also being able to analyze your income from the tenants that you have, because what was it, a stable tenant, right? Let's say someone in construction or so on and so forth that always paid the rent. Some of them are having trouble, right? So it's kind of always just reanalyzing your situation. It's being smart enough to just not do risk assessment monthly, but just when you've got a portfolio, or if you have several, you need to be fully aware, right? Like there's so many dynamics going on right now.
Right. But let's switch gears just a little bit here, Frank. So somebody's listening to this, they own a home, they want to be an investor, but they're not at that stage yet. They know that the rates are high, they're coming up for renewal. What can they do with their property to stabilize it? Co-living, can you maybe help somebody through that? What do you suggest?
Yes. So Bill 23 is, it has many benefits, right? And the benefits that are going to come through Bill 23 are a little long way to come before we get to see that. But there are some things that you can take advantage of. However, everybody needs to know that automatically, due to Bill 23, all the municipalities through the province of Ontario are increasing their taxes tremendously, right? So I've advised my clients to contact their municipalities to find out, or at least get a gauge on what the possible tax increase is going to be for next year, because taxes plays a big role in your overall expenses, and you got to be able to plan for that, because it's happening. Right? They aren't getting that money that they used, and it's big money, by the way, from developers for the infrastructure of being able to maintain that. They have to make it up somewhere. So we're in for some tax increases, probably significant over the next few years. You've got to build that in, right? You got to be aware of it, because don't wait to the last minute. It's happening, right? However, though, with Bill 23, it allows you now to take the opportunity with a larger home, or be able to utilize that property more effectively without having to maybe go through the regulations and all the hoops that you used to go through, or completely weren't allowed to do it, where you could utilize your home and optimize it. And that means, if you have extra rooms, yes, I get it. It's hard to think about having to share your space with somebody, but if you've got that extra room, the room rates are phenomenal. Right? For places that are nice and they're decorated nicely. And if you have a nice home environment, it's co-living. It's a business model. It's a way to be able to take action and do something. Like throughout our lives, how many people do we know that live in big, big homes and they've got all that square feet? Look at all the houses that surround us. And there's just two people living in the house because their kids have grown up, or there's one person living in the house. This is the opportunity in order for them to be able to take advantage of it. And if you need to take advantage of that, do it, right? Because that is, I think, is an area of room rentals, like not a rooming house, but like co-living. I think is got great growth potential, phenomenal growth potential. For people, like we've seen the Airbnb model right now, it went off, like it just took off, but now it's being very competitive. Because as prices have adjusted, people are maybe moving in with their mom and dad. Now they're using it as an Airbnb. So the listings have gone through the roof. And again, it's supply and demand. And so we're seeing some adjustments in, those room rates. You've got to build in for that. There's every model, and there's so many of them. You just need to just be honest with yourself. That's the key. You got to be honest with yourself. Don't be telling yourself numbers, that just aren't real, right? Better to work with lower numbers and overachieve, right? Than to do higher numbers and then underachieve. You're setting yourself up for failure, but that's a definite do.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point there. If you're not aware, if you listen to this and you're not aware of Build 23, definitely look into it. There's going to be some great opportunities there. And, one of the things that I was thinking of the other day is you've got the baby boomers, and a lot of them, like you're saying, are living in these larger homes that are 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 square foot homes. They're by themselves. There's a wave of them that are going to be downsizing soon. Mm-hmm. What happens when that wave comes? Because my kids can't afford those homes, but there's an opportunity there now too with Build 23, where now you can turn those into potentially 3 units, 4 units. That's what's going to end up happening with some of these homes, because who's affording those homes? Yes, I get it. Some people will be able to afford them, but not everyone. What are your thoughts on that? So, have you thought that through?
Oh, of course I have. It's part of my business. Yeah. So you need to have, first of all, you have to look at homes that have the floor plate that works, right? And if you just think, oh, I'm going to buy this property and make it into 4 units. No. There's definite code requirements with regards to that. And you want to have, if you're a realtor, so you see what's out there. You've seen many of these renovations that people have done, and many of them, and I'm not perhaps, trying to point, the dudes out, but when these guys have renovated properties, they haven't renovated them with a woman in mind. They do bathrooms with a pedestal sink. They don't have a vanity for this, that, and the other. They, like many of them haven't been done effectively. Right. So when you're redoing a place, you need to do it so that it's optimized, so that it's efficient, and that it works. So you can't look at a property and say, I'm going to put 4 units in when it really only works for 2. But that opportunity is now upon us. And if you're going to do it right and take advantage of an opportunity. If you're going to renovate a property, these are the times you want to build in smart building technologies. You want to be able to make it. And with all of the grants that are going on right now for energy efficiency, there's some phenomenal programs that people can take advantage of, but you've got to look into it. But that's there. The another great thing that it's not going to happen today, but I pray to God, we're going to start seeing it unfold in the next 2 or 3 years. We're going to see subdivisions. So this is what I think will be a great pre-construction buy in the next 3 years when they start to surface. Will be the neighborhoods that are built with duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes purpose built. And that's what Build 23 allows the developers to do. And so the government can say they're doing something about the housing shortage. But what people don't realize is that the developers aren't going to change the subdivisions that they've got underway right now, because everything's been engineered and designed for what they already spent like $1 gazillion on already. They're not going to change that.
Right.
But they will do that for the next developments that are upcoming. So those are a few years down the road. So the good news is that we are going to see purpose-built triplexes and fourplexes. And I think that is going to be a worthy investment to be able to jump into, because then it gives someone like your daughter, my children, anybody that, anyone who's starting their life, the opportunity to have a place for themselves and then have that extra income and be able to capitalize upon it. That's good news. There's some negatives coming at the very beginning due to the taxes, but opportunity is there, and the cities. And so here's the other thing too, is that even though Bill 23 is in place, the municipalities have to change their regulations within their framework. And certain cities are working quickly to be able to adapt with that. Some of them are actually building special teams to look at fast tracking properties within their building code, because we have an archaic system. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it, but you can certainly have a higher probability of making it work. It's got to be fire compliant. It's got to be hydro compliant, right? It has to have 2 exits. It has to have all the things that are required, right? But
right.
That's kind of been my game, throughout my entire career, was taking properties that were existing and then expanding on those and optimizing them.
Right. Optimizing it, higher and better use, so that you're not just pigeonholed into a property that you can't expand on or it can't do different things.
Yeah, but make sure you do your due diligence to make sure that this is something that you can do, even with the garage suites that are coming available. People think, oh, I'm going to put a garage suite in. You understand that you've got to now put in the services for that, right? And the minute that you add, let's say, to a detached building, let's say a garage in the back, then believe it or not, you get a feed for like a percentage of park development, all these silly things. And I hope that these are the areas that that cities come in line if they really want to make a difference. They should get the same privilege a developer gets. They shouldn't have to be able to pay, which is what I'm afraid may happen. Pay what developers don't have to pay to be able to optimize their properties. I'm hoping that things will align. That's the goal, right? That's the hope. We definitely we have a shortage of housing. So the good news is, the fantastic news is, there's never been a better time to be a landlord. Are you a good landlord, or are you doing it to just collect money? Like, I believe if you're a landlord, then they're your clients, right? What are the services? What are you providing to your client? Are you making sure that they're happy? Are you, I don't know, like, my clients have multiples of doors. Some of them don't have that much, but some of them do. And, are you doing a survey? Are you touching base? Are you opening dialogue and communication with your tenants so that you don't get informed last minute? Because people are like, I'm not going to ask because I don't want to hear the news, or I don't want to open that dialogue. But dialogue is the best way to go, right? Like,
and what you're saying there, Frank, is treat it like a business. Have open lines of communication. People just want to set it and forget it. And that's definitely not the way to do it. I mean, I've got great communication with my tenants if I'm managing it myself. And if I'm not, I've got great communication with my property management because I don't want to be caught off guard. And I think people get into this thinking that, oh, okay, I'll put some money into this property and I'll just kind of set it and forget it. And you can't. You got to treat this thing like a business, open communication, and don't just forget about it. Like you can't. These are it's a profitable business, but you also got to be aware of all the different moving pieces, which I've learned over the years. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit. You did touch on Airbnb.
Can I just touch on that just for one second about property management?
Yeah.
It's one of the most critical parts of investing. And so for anyone who just gets an investment property and then hires somebody as a property manager for a unit or two, well, first of all, you're putting all your financial successes in someone else's hands. And so many people seem to be fearful of doing self-management. It doesn't take anything to self-manage, right? This is an important part of investment success, right? Do you get to a point where you need management? Yes. If you buy out of town, do you need management? Yes. You're absolutely going to have it. But then that management firm, however you define that, you want to make sure that, and you're going to pay for the good quality stuff. And you get what you pay for when it comes to management. So I'm sorry I wanted to touch on that because management can make or break you.
100%. Right? You have to manage your managers. You have to. You got to manage it. Right. So whether you're doing it yourself or you've hired it out, you got to manage your property managers. And I think people miss that piece. At least I believe so.
Well, if you've got a manager, you'd be surprised how nice how a tenant would respond to know that the owner called out just to say hi and see how they're doing. You'd be surprised how well received it would be if a $20 or a $10 Tim Hortons card was sent in the mail, right? It takes little acts of kindness that go a long way. And so those are the types of things that I advocate.
100%. I treat all my tenants like gold. I give them, I'll say a number. I give them all anywhere between $50 to $100 at Christmas time. I give them gifts sometimes better than their own family does.
That's the right way to do it.
Yeah, it is. They're in one of my most important assets. So why wouldn't you treat them like gold? Airbnb. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see new regulations coming down? I think we're starting to see some stuff come down the pipeline. Any concerns there that people need to be aware of?
Well, I don't think I have concerns that anyone else shouldn't have right now that are in that model. What we do know for sure is that municipalities have announced, this is all, this is fact. Let's deal with fact.
Yep.
That basically the municipalities have now gone to the provincial government and they're asking for them to pass a provincial guideline, right? So that way there's a provincial guideline and then they can adjust their municipal guidelines to match the provincial guideline. That's coming down the pipe, right? So what does that mean? I don't know. What I do know is that in Toronto, you've got to have that license. And in order to put it on Airbnb, you need to have that license number. But that's not required in other locations. We know that Hamilton has just recently changed their bylaws to be fairly strict. And being the second largest urban center next to Toronto, is there a likelihood that they may be wanting, Airbnb just needs to flick on the switch as to whether they're going to take those numbers. So that's, listen, it's a great model. I've always been an advocate on rental properties to be fully furnished turnkey, but Airbnb didn't exist in the day that I started doing it. It was for what you call mid to longer term stays, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, because there are people that come and people that go, or, that model will always work. I have clients that have the Airbnb model. I can tell you for sure that what I hear and what I understand is that pricing is being very competitive, right? And we don't know what's going on. There's so many different things that are playing out in the world. We don't know how that affects things. Now, I think the good news is that I think there was a moment in time when the situation occurred in Israel, and what's unfolded. Anyway, it's just not something that I can even talk to because I find it to be all too disturbing, and regardless of who, and the Ukrainian war and all these things are happening. But however, here's the thing. The worry that it could turn into a major clusterfucker of a situation, I think the chances of that have de-escalated. It's clear now that I don't think Iran is looking to have that encounter, right? And I think that no one expected the Israelis to react in the manner that they did. It sent a message. The Americans came in and supported, sent a message. And so whether you agree or disagree with what's happening, and it's just, for me, it's so disturbing. I can't even pay attention. The things I pay attention to are, is it going to cause oil to rise? Is it going to lead into a larger situation? And it looks like that chance has de-escalated. Okay.
Right.
And then with the Russian and Ukrainian war, it's basically really becoming a stalemate now. And so what are the probabilities of perhaps that coming to an end in the next few years? I think it's higher probability now than there was before. That's people are going to come to the table and figure that out. So I look at that as being good news, right? I don't get too caught up in the China-Taiwan situation because it's a serious thing.
Yep.
China plays a huge role. I think that what we do know is that these silicon manufacturing plants that are so critical and of such great concern because they produce 90% of these semiconductor chips, they have plants now being built all over the world, right? And they do take time. I think it takes anywhere from, I don't know, I'm not an expert, 5 to 10 years from what I understand. Right. But once they're built, I don't know. And in Taiwan, half the people, from what I understand, wouldn't have a problem going back with China, right? Like that's stuff that we can't, how do we speak to that, right? That's not our forte, but what I am against is war, right? And you can see that clearly it's a business to a certain extent, but there's a limit. And what's happening in Israel is in Palestine is just so horrific. I'm hoping the good news that comes from that is that people somehow get it through their minds that this is not the answer, right? This is like innocence, children, women, elderly, nowhere in the world should they be harmed. They should be cherished and worshiped. And this whole thing of what's going on is just unspeakable. And I hope that maybe people just start realizing that war is not the answer. However, you can't allow terrorism to occur, and you need to hunt down those individuals wherever they are in the world. But as a global community, you need to hunt them down, because there's things that should never be allowed to occur. And that should be a common theme, right? But that doesn't mean you can hunt them down. And if anybody's good at hunting them down, it's the Israelis. So, so I'm not too worried now about that. I was for a while. I was worried about the spike in oil. I was worried about that affecting inflation. I think that the United States is it's sitting. Let's just say they're giving signals that basically are leading towards the fact that it's, even though they've got this insane economy, there's other factors of concern that are leading them to break caution, right? Yep. And so if we do go into a recession, or if it is declared that there's a global recession and it's coming around to the Airbnb, that just means that there's going to be a lot less travel. And so that will have a direct impact on Airbnbs and or destination locations. And, because that's just historically, we know that. Is it going to stay like that forever? No, right? Like, the one thing that we have to realize is that, especially for those who don't have to sell, it doesn't matter what the price goes down to, it always eventually cycles back up, and it always supersedes. And when you talk about amortizations, yes, I think there's a high likelihood that regulations and rules with regards to amortization terms are going to start being, you would think, would be worked on so that it would become more affordable. And people are thinking, okay, well, how can we afford anything if rates are at 7% or whatever the case may be? The reality is that the prices will eventually adjust to reflect that. And in investment properties, it comes down to a cap rate. So how do you have a cap rate of 5% or 5.5 or whatever CMHC says it's okay today if your lending rate is at 8%? Doesn't make sense, right? There's a lot of things that don't make sense. So when they don't make sense, logic has to proceed, and you need to do your own math. And it's not that difficult. Like, it really isn't. So I see opportunity everywhere, but I do see models changing and fluctuating. And that's just business.
I agree. I think there's great opportunity coming, and there are some that are out there as well too. And you also can't just wait for them to land in your lap. You can also go out there and make them. But I do want to shift a little bit here, because I want to know, what is your day like, Frank? I know work-life balance is important to you. I follow you on social media. You've got a beautiful family. How do you manage your business, and how do you manage and balance the family side of it? What do you do? And with the experience that you have and where you are in your life, what do you do? How do you do it?
Well, if my kids were listening to this, they'd be laughing right now, because, I'm like the definition of a family guy. And so I've always believed I had dyslexia, so I could not pursue believe in education. So my kids have been very fortunate, and they've all done well, and they're all doing well, but they're all, they're 20 somethings, early 30s. And what were you like? How much were you hanging around with your mom and dad at that time? Like, it's not priority. Let's put it that way. So I have to work, as many parents have to try and get them to come out and come over. And it's ebb and flow of life. It's every parent goes through this. I don't want to sit and cry in my milk like many parents are of my era with children of that age. It becomes crickets. Hello, are you out there, kind of thing. Yeah. But I've got a very healthy family, and I've got a great family. I've got a granddaughter now, and so it's been wonderful. I just enjoy. Listen, when you ask me that question, I identified as a father, and when the kids weren't coming home for dinner, and because I love to cook and have them over, I really started feeling empty inside. I am going to be totally honest. And I know that this is something that many parents go through. And then I identified as a father. I didn't identify as Frank any longer. And so I had to go through that whole, and have been going through that whole transition of getting to just be good with me. Right. And I'm there, but it took time. Right. So my days are spent going out for walks. I'm very lucky. I love what I do. Like I'm in a career now that I'm going to do it to the day I die. Right. Like one of the lawyers that we have that's part of our group has been practicing law, commercial real estate and real estate law since the 70s. Right. And he's an investor in light industrial and so on and so forth. He doesn't have to work. He does it because he loves it. And I just so happen, I'm really blessed that with what I do, I wouldn't want to be a realtor, right? I'm glad I'm out of that game, but I learned all my experience from being on the ground. But what I do now, I've never been happier. So I'm very happy. I have a regular, I guess you call it routine. And so I'm up early every day. I go to bed at a decent hour. I am very, very aware of what I listen to or what I see. I have to be up to date on certain events that go on around the world because they could always have an effect here. But I'm actually more now involved in seeing the different opportunities that are unfolding because they're coming. They're there now, right? All the things that I talked to a few years ago are happening. And so your properties that you wouldn't think that or were not possible to see, to actually see come available on the market are materializing, right? And so I'm so optimistic about what's going on. I'm so proactive. My clients are phenomenal. Like they're the ones that are going to be the next rock stars in the industry. But I'm also making sure that they understand I don't have to tell them because they're all phenomenal, but integrity in the way that you basically live your life and what the message is that you convey. Be very aware that there are people who follow you, these social media individuals, and they do listen to what you have to say. And then, so that takes that with that great honor, it comes responsibility, right?
You can tell.
And so,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you can tell that you're passionate about what you do. And I want to get in some coaching and mentoring and maybe what the difference is. But before I do, though, what do you think has attributed to who you are, your success, the one skill that you've learned over the years that you're like, I'm so glad I learned this and this really helped me get to where I am today? If you can narrow it down to one skill set or one attribute.
No education. Everything I did on my own. Blue collar family, blue collar. My father was a firefighter. My mother was, wasn't like wealthy family involved in real estate. Everything I did, I had to do myself. I like learning because of dyslexia. I have to do something myself in order to learn it. And so I enjoy that process. So I'm very good at being able to deal with adversity. How's that? If I had it defining,
yeah.
I'm always able to somehow plant the flag at the top of the mountain. And I've also learned over time on how to not allow circumstances or situations to overwhelm me. And I also believe in intention, by the way. I also believe that if you visualize what you want in your life, if you really are what you think. And so if you have this persona that's positive on the outside, but you're beating yourself up on the inside, that is the messaging that you have to change. And you've got to visualize the life that you want. And that's real. That really does work. And it's not going to happen in a day or two. But if you have specific intentions and you do that every day and you visualize, 2-3 months down the road, all of a sudden it's just things just start getting revealed to you. And that's been a gift. If anything, I see the world in a different way. I also understand that we're all interconnected. We all bleed red. All this stuff that goes on, man. I'm lucky. My kids don't see color. I don't see color. We don't see disability. we all bleed red, right? Yeah. And so I've been very lucky that way. And I'm not like per se involved in any religion per se, but I know there's more to this world than what's here. And I know that because of experiences that I've had in my life. So I am very optimistic that this is what we need to do, is make this our, whatever we call our space in this time, in this era, as positive as we can possibly make it. And if we do that for ourselves, if you love yourself, if you really love yourself, it's the stupidest thing, because I would have always thought I loved myself. But if you really learn how to love yourself, you'll know it when you come to peace with yourself, and you're not beating yourself up, and you can be kind to yourself and forgive yourself, right? So, because everybody makes boo-boos, but you're like, fuck, yeah, I kind of went down that road, but that's okay. I'm making that transitional change. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. It does. And that's a hard thing to do, what you just said there, Frank, I think we all love ourselves, but do you truly love yourself? And we're always the hardest on ourselves. We beat ourselves up the most. And I think the more mistakes that you make, the more trip ups that you do, I think it allows you to realize that it's a journey, and you're learning as you go. And I find, at least for myself, the more that I've done that, the more I realize that they're gifts in that. And I start to actually realize that I'm not perfect. And I think we're always sometimes looking for perfection, but we're not.
I don't only speak to myself. I know that I got caught up in noise and always thought, I was always with somebody or had relationships and all this kind of stuff. That meant I was a great guy. I had wonderful kids and all those types of things. And, but it's a different thing to be just with yourself and kind of be good with that. That's not easy. So, when I was younger, I'd hear about people, my father would, pack up his bags and travel and go anywhere on his own. And I was like, oh God, I don't think I'd want to travel on my own. Right. Yeah. But now I'm totally into that. I mean, I'll tell you, the craziest part is when you get to this stage, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when you really just start to have that time to self-reflect on your life. First of all, the people that you love the most and your dearest friends become obviously the most, but you don't even need them to make you happy. That's the key. You're content with them, and then everybody else is a bonus. And then you become excellent. Then you become an expert at removing drama out of your life. And then what happens is that, you don't need to be around a lot of people. And it's kind of weird. I almost feel like I'm getting reclusive, but I love the community that I've built, and I love my clients, and I get so much happiness from that. But I'm actually low key, man. I really, if I didn't have to do social media stuff, I would not do it. I've always been off the grid. I like my life being off the grid. I enjoy that solitude and that peace, but I also cherish the valued relationships that I have. But I value them even more than I ever did before. I don't know. I don't know if I've answered the question, but it's a journey. All I can tell you, it's a journey, and it starts with your intentions on what you want in your life.
It is a journey. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about Sylvester Stallone and the age that he's at right now. And he was mentioning the way that it's happening is that when he looks back at his past, it feels like as if it's just kind of crumbling away. And so he feels like he has to keep working and keep growing and keep doing things, because it's like this blur of the life that he's had. And he keeps wanting to keep doing more things and enjoying the journey of it. And I think that's what it is. It is the journey. It's the journey of trying new things, seeing where this is going, and having fun with it. And I think that's the more like the conversations I enjoy. Like, I enjoy this conversation I'm having with you, Frank. I find when I'm having conversations with people that are older than me, they have so much more wisdom, and I do my best to pay attention, to really soak it in. because they've seen things that I have not seen yet.
Listen, you're dynamic. You always have been. You just like, you're a good spirit. And I've always been able to identify that. You can tell, good aura against not so much. But in business, and you've got so many balls that you've got in the air, right? You're bouncing so many balls that you've got to have that decouple time. Just everybody needs it to be able to kind of be at one. So the crazy part is that somehow my kids have already got this under control. Like my youngest son, he's like total Buddha man. And, my eldest son has got, life is just, he's killing it, but he's very good on his own. And so is my daughter, very independent. So their father was a shit show because, I don't know how they turned out the way they did. But they're way ahead of the ball. And it was really my daughter that said, Dad, you know what? We just want you to get the hell out of here. You've lived your life for us. Get out of here. Go just be anywhere in the world. We'll come and meet you. But you've got to stop living your life for us. You need to start living your life for you and doing the things that you love. And that came from my daughter, for God's sake, right? You got to be open to messages that are going to come from places that you don't even expect. But those messages will come and they'll repeat themselves and it could say the same thing, right? So you got to be perceptually aware. So I found happiness in that. And I enjoy helping people deal with adversity because I'm good at it. And I can give them that confidence so that they can pursue their dreams and know that I'm there, if that makes sense. Like I'm good at that. It's always, I'm good at that. I know I am because I care about people. I care about what happens to them. Like even people I don't hear about, or when you read these stories, I feel their pain. And I never, and that's why I said to you before we did our podcast, and I've been conveying this to you many times, that I don't want to be the guy that delivers, shock and awe, negative messaging. I actually want to be the guy that delivers the truth is everything's going to be okay, right? You've got to just make sure that whoever you get advice from, and it's not about me, but you make sure you get somebody that you can trust that's been down that road and then some, right? That knows the corners. I wish I had a mentor when I was younger. Oh my God. If I had a mentor when I was in my 20s, my life would be different today. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
Right.
Frank, listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think we covered a lot of grounds here. We covered some good technical grounds and opportunities out there, and what to do, and also just in the how to live life in the spiritual realm as well too, and whatever faith it is that you have. But enjoying this ride. Any last piece of advice that you'd like to share, or message that you want people to really get from Frank Taylor?
Yeah, I want to talk about you for a moment. I want to tell you that you're blessed. You have, not only do you have a beautiful family, which is the most important thing, but you have the ability to convey a message to people, and you're willing to look indoors that may not have the best news answer, but you're willing to open those doors, and you're showing people how to do that. And you've got a platform that you've been phenomenal at, and you've been an inspiration, and that's a gift. Like that's a gift, right? And so be aware of what the world is giving you, right? To have that, but it's okay to also, you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? And you're the seeker. I would describe you as someone who seeks knowledge. And I kind of feel like I'm the same way too. And I admire that. I'm proud to have been able to get to know you, and I'm honored to be on the show. I know that you are a leader to many, and I think that that's phenomenal. It's always been something that I've always respected. So my last words is I just want to say thank you. And I'm glad that we talk in between our shows, and we have some great conversations, I think. And I feel like I've known you forever. And I value that. And so that's how I'd like to close it, by thanking you for what you do.
Frank, thank you very much. That means a lot coming from you. I appreciate that. And I do enjoy every conversation that we've had. And I appreciate you. So thank you very much. How can people get in contact with you if they want to learn more about you, or if they want to get some mentorship from you, or maybe just even have a conversation with you? How can they do that?
Yeah. So franktaylorconsulting.ca, Instagram at Frank Taylor Consulting. My phone number is 905-971-7070. Call me. Yeah, I'm blessed at what doing what I do. I love it just like you do, right? You're doing something that you love to do. So we're both very lucky men. All you got to do is Google my name, Frank Taylor, real estate, and it's there. So anybody who's interested, want to know more, look me up, and I'm here and easy to find.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Frank. And you shared your number. Not too many people do that. So that goes to show you who you are. And
oh my God, I never even thought of that. Yeah. Oh boy. Holy Lord. Okay. Now, thank you.
Anyways, Frank, listen, I appreciate you, and I enjoyed this conversation, and we'll definitely do it again. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.
Man. Appreciate it.